All right, I'm Simon Ford, and I am the founder of Ford's Gin, which was kind of a culmination of my entire career's journey leading up to that moment. Started flogging wine in a wine shop down in Bath in England, which got me a job in London, the big city. Moved up and started selling wine. Got interested in spirits. Found that gin and tonic was my favorite drink after wine and beer in those days, and eventually that would lead me into a marketing role with a very old gin brand that I sort of fell in love with the category at that point. And so I took that brand around to about 8 countries around the world, which was really nice. It led me to the United States, where I got a job with that company. And um, and then eventually I did a few other things, worked on other brands, bartended, and so on, but all of it in the drinks industry, which was really nice. And then one day, a good friend of mine said, "Simon, you should do a gin of your own." And at the time, I thought, I don't know if I could do that. I didn't really have the confidence. But he kind of joined me on a journey to create a gin that was sort of specifically made for mixing in cocktails. He was a bartender and quite an influential one at that. So it was a really nice collaboration to work with a bartender and me as a gin nerd to sort of come up with a concept for a gin. But that was the very beginning. The next bit was going to get a lot more difficult. So, what was interesting about creating Forge Gin is me and my bartender friend had created some concepts for a recipe, but of course, we didn't have a distillery. We didn't have money to build a distillery. And if I'm being honest, we didn't have the knowledge to build a distillery either. And so we started floating around our idea to various different distilleries around the world. And a few sort of picked up the phone to us, and but one in particular did a few test gins for us that were delicious, and we were like, "This is the person." And I think we actually got very lucky in that moment because obviously, when we found out who was making these delightful gins for us with our recipe concepts, it was a gentleman by the name of Charles Maxwell. And Charles Maxwell was an 11th generation gin distiller whose family had been making gin in London since 1680. They had been a part of the Worshipful Company of Distillers, his family, back in 1680, and in 1740 created their first gin brand as a family, and had been doing it ever since. Charles had sort of taken over the family business in 1993, set up a gin distillery in South London called Thames Distillers, and he was the guy that we worked with on developing a recipe. Just like every sort of great uh, person as a team behind them to make them great. And and he had a really good team with him. We had they're still working at Thames, a girl called Gemma, who would work in the lab on developing the recipes, testing the botanicals, and we would taste those, and Charles would give his guidance. And once we had our recipe, we had a gentleman by the name of Adam would make all the gin for us. He's now at Beefeater, which is really nice. And recently, we have a new gin distiller called Okju, who comes from South Korea, and she's a qualified gin distiller, so she makes the gin these days. But ultimately, under Charles Maxwell, he has his son George Maxwell, the 12th generation, and a small team of brilliant people that go about making every drop of forged gin to this day. All of the forged gin that is made in a little still called Tom Thumb, or most of it is. There's a second still called Thumbelina, but Tom Thumb is quite a special still. It was made by the famous still company John Doerr, and they were an offshoot of Aeneas Coffey, who invented the continuous still, creating all of the gin stills in when gin was booming in London. And the very last still that company ever made is the little still that sits in the corner at Thames Distillers pumping out Ford's gin. And it's a stainless steel still. It's only 500 liters inside, which is why it can be stainless steel. It essentially is like a looks like a giant saucepan really with a swan's neck on top of it, and we fill it with all the botanicals and it makes all of the gin there. But yeah, John Doerr's last ever still, made in 1983, before the company became defunct, which was nice. So it's quite precious. So it's because it's so small, it's being named Tom Thumb. And Thumbelina was a replica that was created using X-rays of the original still. So in case something ever happened to Tom Thumb, there's backup. Forged gin. When we were creating forged gin, we went to great lengths to make sure this gin worked well in cocktails. So we had a list of all of the drinks that have made gin famous over the years. Whether it's the gin and tonic, the martini, the Negroni, Tom Collins, Gimlet, so on and so forth. But these are all the drinks that sort of propelled gin into being a sort of internationally known spirit. And so we looked at all of those different drinks, and we looked at how the different flavors that we could use in botanicals went into giving our gin its flavor. But once we had that concept alive, and George and Charles were making the recipes with Gemma, we then gave all of those gins to bartenders. And those bartenders would then taste it in those cocktails for us and tell us what they thought we could do differently, if it needed more citrus, if it needed more juniper, if it needed less of something, any ideas. And then we kept tweaking the recipe for Fords until we finally had the recipe that's in every bottle to this day. And it took us about 2.5 years to do that. And about 83, I would say, my best guess of looking at my files, about 83 different gin recipes were tested with bartenders. So that was a philosophy. We always looked at the people that really use the product on a daily basis in the drinks that have made gin famous, for input on our recipe. And so when it came to creating a bottle, and when it came to creating a label for the gin, it made sense that we would go through the exact same process. And so there are people that work in bars every day that are pouring drinks, and we were like, let's make their life easier if we can, and let's at least give it a go. And so we got input from bartenders, about 150 in all. And they sort of let us know that the type of neck that's comfortable to hold, the type of middle grip on a bottle that's comfortable to hold. We tried to make the bottle as lightweight as possible, which uses less glass, which is great for the environment, or better for the environment, should I say. And ultimately a bottle that you could pour in different ways, so that if you were a bartender, you could pour that bottle in different ways and not get repetitive injury syndrome, which sometimes bartenders have. So we sort of went to great lengths to sort of talk to the bartender community about what would make a good bottle for them, and of course something that would fit in a speed rail, fit a speed pour, and all of those different things. And so when you look at the expertise of your industry, you end up with something that I would say is quite functional. And the Forged Gin bottle is very functional for the bartender, which we hope translates to the home bartender as well. So that's really what we did with the Forged bottle. We created something that was ergonomic rather than beautiful. Now, if people find it beautiful, then that's obviously something that would make me happy too. But it was function over form, was very much our philosophy, and asking the bartender community in the same way as we'd ask them about the liquid, and how it tastes and works in cocktails, how they could use that bottle. We also extended that to the label. So while the label is a great piece of design done by United Creatives, a Manchester-based firm, who really sort of took sort of elements from when gin and all of those cocktails were well known, we also wanted to try and cram as much information that we felt would be important to the professional bartender as possible. Because a lot of professional bartenders, like me, are nerds about the spirits that they use and the ingredients that they use. And so to know where things are sourced and where the ingredients that come from that go into making our gin, and how we actually make it in a technical level, is maybe not information for everybody, but it's certainly information for the nerdy bartenders out there, or the sort of gin fans out there. And so we wanted to make sure as much of that was on the bottle as possible. So you find we have a very maximalist label. It's very cluttered and busy, but at the same time, if you look in with a magnifying glass, there's probably most of the information you could ever find on the story of our gin, the story of our botanicals, the story of our production, our distiller. I think my name might even be on it somewhere, I'm not sure. Even the company we get our botanicals from. And so we just wanted to share as much useful and honest information about our brand as possible, and be as transparent as possible about how we go about making it. The bar industry and bartenders have been defining how people drink from a passionate place, like chefs have been defining how we eat from a passionate place um, for centuries, you know. And so I like that Ford's is sort of rooted in that rather than just a marketing concept, if that makes sense, you know. Bartenders would be the ones that gave us new drinks to drink, and some of them take off and become famous and probably make certain products very big around the world. But it's the bartender that really is driving those trends, you know, whether it was they get interested in bringing us 100% agave tequilas, you know, whether they introduce us to a mezcal, something new that's crazy, or something like that. Even putting bitters into cocktails sort of came from bars. Really, it's not something that we saw advertised on the telly. It was very much these bartenders driving these trends, and so I think that working in tandem with them and doing something that they would appreciate was very much in the DNA of what we were about. I mean, I come from a bartending background. My business partners came from a bartending background, so it made total sense for us to do it that way. I think other people have done it, and I think it's a really wise thing to do. It's a very proud moment for me. It's a very tiny snapshot. It doesn't mean we're hitting the stratosphere with the brand. It doesn't mean our sales are through the roof or anything like that. But it's a snapshot of about 100 bars around the world, which I love. There's a global perspective there. The bars that they ask are ones that are quite are being recognized for creating good drinks, good atmospheres, and good vibes. And so I like that as well. And when they are asked what brands are they selling or what's trending in their bars, Forge Gin hit both of those lists. Now, selling well's nice because that pays the bills, but trending is the gins that people are asking for, or the ones that they like working with. And so I actually particularly like being on that list more than I do even the selling one, because it just shows that something that we're doing has resonated. And so yeah, I'm very proud to be on that list. If you look at that list, it's some of the biggest name brands in the world, and for us and a few other smaller brands that I saw on that list to have sort of made our way into that mind share of the bartender, is something that I'm very proud of, and I think that the other smaller brands that are on that list should be proud as well. I loved that there was a sort of gin boom, and I think what I liked about it most was what was behind it. There was a lot of there were some laws put into place that made it easier for people to become entrepreneurs in the gin world. It didn't require huge capital investment, which is very restrictive for a lot of people. And so what sort of led to a gin boom is it being easier to actually create to open a gin distillery, and actually you don't need to age gin, so you can just acquire and buy the botanical ingredients and do this. And so what it's done is it's made the gin industry exciting again. There's a lot of choice out there, there's a lot of places to go. Of course, what comes with that is it's hard to navigate. There are ones that are not so good, there are ones that are great. But at the same time, that still makes for an interesting dynamic. And what makes it even more fun is that people are making gin all over the world. There's gins coming out of Asia and Africa. There, like virtually every continent out there is sort of having a go at creating gins, and they put their own different spins on it because it's based off of botanical ingredients. And so I think a lot of that led to the gin boom. I also think that this new and renewed interest in cocktail culture that has sort of been bubbling up since about 2000 and just is reaching new levels and new heights now has really driven gin. We see that they like to work with gin a lot more than other spirits, which is very nice. But it also makes sense because gin is essentially created for cocktails. All those different flavors in gin from botanicals create complexities. So I think the gin boom also owes a bit to the cocktail world and the bartenders that have sort of been pushing it forward. So I think it's a really exciting time for gin on those fronts. And I actually only see it getting better. I think that it's going to be a really nice and exciting next 2, 3 years, because I think that these are just foundations, and that more and more places around the world are starting to create gins and create gin recipes. I think that cocktail culture is here to stay. It is only going to grow. And so I think the gin boom is is only going to continue. And I think we're starting to find that better tonic waters are finding their way around the world as well. And when the gin and tonic is good, there's no stopping the category. I think about all the drinks that made gin famous, that they come from different places. In Italy, then the Negroni, which is arguably one of the most popular gin drinks in the world today, came out of coffee culture, and it's an aperitivo drink, something that you'd have pre-dinner, and of course it evolved into something that people would have pre-dinner and post-dinner, and that's the style of drink that ultimately came out of Italy. The martini is New York's crowning glory. That really is a drink that emerged into popularity there and found itself around the world when different bars around the world were taking on American style drinks. And the drinks in the US are often stronger, and the drinks in the UK are often longer and more refreshing, which makes no sense because our weather doesn't our weather doesn't tie into that to that philosophy. But martinis certainly, and that style of sort of more spirituous cocktail came out of the UK. Sorry, out of the USA, which is really nice. Whereas things like punches came out of the UK, and so you start to see how different cultures have put their influence on the way we drink gin around the world, and I really like that. I really like that sort of global perspective of the category. Oh, I wish and hope that Fort Gin is not just a bottle of gin to people. It's an extension of the hospitality industry, because of where it comes from. And what we try to do when we are introducing our product to new to people, or engaging people that already engage with our gin, is to bring them things that we find fun and inspiring. And music is as much a part of hospitality as are the drinks. The things come together when we go to bars, restaurants, or concerts, or live music in whatever setting. We're often there with our drink and our music, and uh, we feel that the martini is a sort of cultural drink in itself. Like people, when they try a martini, they think about how they're dressing up, where they might go for it, and so we tried to bring the worlds of cocktails and music together, and so we collaborated with the former hip hop duo, the Handsome Boy Modeling School. That is in part was Prince Paul, who produced all of De La Soul. He was in Grave Diggers, in Stetsasonic, one of the original hip hop outfits, and his partnership with Dan the Automator, who produced the Gorillas, amongst many other things, who is currently producing the new Black Keys album. They collaborated 20 years ago on Handsome Boy Modeling School, created a seminal hip hop album, and we managed to get them together to create some music inspired by the martini, so that we in turn could throw events around music and martinis. Hopefully, we could inspire people to think about music and martinis, and look at music as part of hospitality, like the drinks are part of hospitality, like atmosphere, like decoration, like in some instances what you choose to wear. So you know Ford's gin is just a bottle of gin, ultimately. Um, how we can inspire people to have fun in life is the privilege we get by having a bottle of gin that employs us. And so creating music and bringing that to people um, was some fun that we had, because we think it's an important part of the hospitality industry. Music to drink martinis to was really, apart from two tracks that we streamed, is a vinyl only kind of release. There's a little bit of I think we were ahead of the curve. Vinyl's having a comeback right now. We were doing this pre-COVID, and it was always the intention to have vinyl, because vinyl takes you on a journey. you know it's like you put on the record and you listen to it from beginning to end. And for us, it was like, here is our journey for you. Go on a journey, have a martini. We don't want you like knocking back the martini in one song and then picking up your iPhone to you find the next tune, right? We would sit down, relax, enjoy the music, and we felt vinyl was a good avenue And if we can influence people to get into vinyl as well as martinis, our job is done. It's really exciting times with Fords Gin right now. We're 11 years old as a brand. Um, we're still a very small, blip on the radar for most people when it comes to gin. Um, but we've made something that we're very proud of, and we're starting to expand our reach is probably the right way of putting it. So, we're trying to get to more countries with our gin. So we sort of went from about five countries that we were selling our gin to about 23 in the last couple of years. So that's been really exciting. And that's really exciting for me personally as well, because I get to sort of see how different places the hospitality industries are. Like I was recently in Brazil and I was recently in Turkey, and seeing how they drink gin, but also seeing how they entertain themselves in nightlife was extremely um a fun thing for me to do. So yeah, Fords is starting to become more of have more of an international footprint as a brand. We we're gonna build a little visitor center, and I know you got the chance to come and see our old distillery, which was very much, very few people got to see that, which is nice. But we're building a little room that we'll be able to entertain people in the future, and so we'll be able to bring more guests down to see how our gin is made, see our little Tom Thumb gin still at work, and hopefully have a cocktail with us. And yeah, hopefully just keep plugging away and having fun with the things that we do, like music to drink martinis to.